I have an advantage, I think, over a lot of people because of my mom and her prayer. So I had, I mean, she couldn't have children, and so her prayer was for me to have a child, and as she would give him into the service of the Lord, whatever, be it a man or a girl. Dad did not know that prayer. He had no clue what that prayer was. She told my Aunt Rose that prayer. And then, of course, I got conceived and I showed up. And so her whole vision then was to get me to become a nun.
Mm-hmm.
I was a pretty rebellious little kid. I was not none.
You weren't nun material, huh?
Nun material, even back then, Yeah, and we went around a few times, but I had no clue about that, And so when she passed away, no one was here to tell me about that because Dad didn't know. I went into nursing, and then from there, I went into full-time ministry, and that's when Aunt Rose sat me down. We were at a Janelle's reunion and sat me down and said, "Gina, this is amazing that you are actually fulfilling your mother's prayer." And I said, "What prayer?" And she said, about you being a nun. And I said, "What?" And she sat me down then and told me the whole story. And I tell you, that really, I mean, talk about how we don't know how God is going to guide our lives. I mean, he is going to get you where you need to be,
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I consider myself where I am, not because of my great anything, but my mom had a direction. And even though I didn't go that direction, God made sure that I was his. I mean, and like I said before, I had many times of opportunities to be married, but there was something inside of me that just kept saying, "There's something more. There's something more." And when I realized then, when my aunt told me, Aunt Rose told me that she wanted to be a nun, things just sort of fell together. My life was for the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. So anyway, with that light, I feel like I have a way advantage over most people who don't have anybody guiding them. After Mom's death, of course, the priest told Dad that your wife, God wanted her, and so Dad, he got livid. He just said, if that's the kind of God there is, I want nothing to do with him. And he packed us off, but we left the church, and never stepped into a church, period, unless I went back with his mother, and then she would take me to the Catholic Church. But I gave my first Holy Communion. That was the day she died, was on my first Holy Communion day. And I still went to First Holy Communion. And I remember standing up there and the priest announcing her death to the congregation because no one knew. And he said, "We have a brave young lady here coming and getting communion and giving her life to Christ, even though her mother has just passed away this morning, And at that point, now, of course, I didn't know anything, but looking back, I felt like the Lord just picked me up in his hand at that point, sort of carried me through life, because I could have gotten so much trouble. Life could have been awful, but it was like God put a cocoon around me, and just sort of carried me through life from that point on. So, like I have a great advantage, I really do, over most people.
That's great. That's great to feel that way, and that you really believe that. That's perfect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. So let's launch into the story.
Alrighty. After my mom's death, Dad.
How old are you now?
68.
68. Gotcha. Okay.
Okay. Mom died when I was 7, and her unexpected death just really threw Dad for a total loop. And so we started. He started moving. We left the family. We left. We left everything that I knew at that point, and he started moving. And
You say moving, physically moving,
Yes,
or
physically moving. Yes, we left the house she died at. We moved out to the country from having a very loving family, which you knew we had. We had a very strong knit family. My mother was extremely protective. Uh, we went from there to I was all by myself at 7 years old. I remember out in this country, and I had a goat and a cat.
do you remember where
And
you moved?
Clovis, yeah, we went to
Clovis.
Clovis.
Okay, yeah.
Mhm. And I had to ride a bus to school, which mom always took me to school before that. And I was totally baffled. I mean, no idea what this world was like. I came home to my goat and and my cat, and I would go out. I remember the property was surrounded by a cornfield, and it had been harvested. So me and the goat would go out in the cornfield, and we'd sit there, and I'd husk corn that was left and feed the goat, and wait until Dad came home, and
So
Dad
that
come home.
began your long love affair with goats, right?
I guess so. We had goats when I was a kid. We had
Yeah.
horses and goats, there when growing up before she passed away. And he brought the nanny goat with us. That's where, we had her. And so we ended up, staying there for a short bit of time after I got out of school. We ended up moving back into Fresno. And then his parents moved in with us for a little bit. And Dad was, I didn't see him a lot. He was gone. Hello. And he packed us up again, and we left Fresno, and we moved to a logging camp out of Bakersfield, way up in the mountains. And my life of adventure started at that moment. I mean, I was never in the house. I was running the mountains. I was playing outside. I just fell in love.
You took to it?
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Before the move, actually, right after she died that summer, Dad moved me up to the mountains with my grandparents, and I lived up there with them through that summer before he married. And I was really, of course, I was all by myself there as a kid, and I was playing in the woods. I was running all over the place all the time. I mean, and Poppy, he was a very quiet Italian, but he loved the mountains, and he loved to make things with his hands. And I remember following him in the woods, and he didn't talk to me at all. He just collect things and pick them up and bring them home. And he had polio, but that didn't stop him. He made things. Oh my gosh, he made the most beautiful stuff, and he would work and do all of these things, and I would watch him. And whenever he stepped outside, I was right behind him like his little shadow, and I would run through the woods with him, and he'd collect and bring things back home, and we had our horses up there for a while, and Dad and I would ride, in the mountains. I remember we get back down to the valley, he marries, we moved to the logging camp. And so those few months up in the mountains with Nani and Poppy and following him in the mountains, moving into the logging camp was like heaven. I mean, it was literally like heaven. I was free. I just spent all my time, and my stepbrother and I did all kinds of fun things together. He was a year younger than me.
Did you go to school up there?
Yes, we went to school up there. It was just total, like I said, it was just total heaven. I loved it. We stayed up there almost 4 years. Then Dad moved back down. We went to Santa Maria then, and he bought gas stations, and he started doing gas stations. Valley was the only horse we did not sell, and he had her rebred and brought her to Santa Maria, and she had the first foal, and that foal was given to me under the understanding that I would train it. Well, I never trained a horse in my whole entire life. It's like, okay, but I loved horses, so that was Dad's first initial bring Gina out of the box kind of a thing of independence in a way. You learn how to do this. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I then, at 13 years old, started learning how to train a horse, which I found. I was looking for books. I was looking for we didn't have internet then,
Right.
And,
didn't have Google. Yeah.
No, had nothing but hard docs and stuff. and Dad didn't give me it. Dad could train a horse. He did. He trained the stallion you knew. But he wouldn't, it was like he was just giving me a chance to strike out on my own with a huge project.
Yeah.
And if I wanted some help, I could ask him, but he would usually give me very little suggestion. He might just drop a few hints, and I'd have to go figure it out.
Uh-huh.
I did get her trained, and it was very interesting because I remember one time she bucked me off something royal and I hit the ground really badly. I looked like I was getting nailed to a cross, man. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't hardly move. And I remember getting to the house and I called Dad on the phone, gasping a little bit, and I said, guess what happened? And he goes, you got bucked off. I said, how'd you know? He said, I was expecting it.
Yeah.
I said, oh. He said, did you get back on? I said, yes, I did. He goes, good. Go back. I went, okay. So I'm back out there. And I was a little leery, and I remember one day I was still doing some groundwork with her and I was still doing some stuff. And he came out, he didn't say a word. He came out and I had her tied up and I was getting on, but she was still sort of snubbed up to a post and he untied it. And I'm like, no, and he just starts leading her down on the pasture, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He never said a word to me, never said a word, just let me up and down, up and down. Pretty soon he just unhooked the lead. He says, go on.
Yeah.
And that took that hesitancy away from me. And her and I became a super good team after that,
Yeah.
That's the way he started instilling in me independence. It wasn't, Dad, do this for me, Dad, do that for me. It was, you can do this,
Yeah.
You can do this. And whenever I'd get stuck, he wouldn't say, now you need to do this, this, and this. He would just sort of like then lead me, and show me, not lecturing me, not doing anything like that, and as I continued to grow, the horses were a very big part of my life in growing. They taught me a whole lot of responsibility. They taught me a whole lot about myself. And Dad
you think he taught you that way because he knew that you would become more independent, or that was just his strong silent style?
I think he wanted me independent.
Yeah.
I think he wanted me not to be, like I said, he had no clue what my course in life was going to be. He had no clue. So he had still inside of him he wanted me independent. He did not want me dependent to the society,
Yeah.
Of course, he always wanted me married. I mean, he was always trying to marry me off, but yet he still wanted me very independent, and it would have been very interesting to be as independent as I am to be married. But
Yeah.
there is people who are, and I really admire that. That is very good. But his way of teaching me was that from as long as I can remember him telling me, there is not male or female jobs. There's just jobs. And you just have to learn how to do what you can do. And he said, now you don't have a lot of brawn. You're not strong and tough and all this other stuff. So you got to use your brain. And when you need to use leverage, you need to use leverage. And he would just teach me like that kind of way,
And give an example of how that played out.
Well, one of the main examples was I was trying to change a bolt when I was up here working on the ranch with him on a tractor tire. And I couldn't get that tractor tire bolt to move at all. I mean, I was swinging all of my weight on the end of that wrench and that thing wasn't not budging, And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I go to Dad and I go, Dad, I can't get this bolt, and he looked at me and I tell you, that's the word he never had in his vocabulary was can't. He hated that word. I mean, hated it. And he looked at me and he says, There is no such word as can't. I looked at him and I went, Dad, I'm having a really hard time taking this bolt off of this tractor. He said, okay, come on. So I followed him again. He picked up a pipe, he picked up the wrench, and he says, now add that to the end of the wrench and you'll get it off. And he walked away. He didn't take it off.
Right.
I put the thing on the end, popped up that thing off, smiled from one end to the other, and said, Dad, I got it. And he went, uh-huh. Mm-hmm. That's when he said, you use your brain. You don't have the bronze, you use the brain. And boy, there's many a times, I know the different chores that I have had to do over my life, that thought hasn't popped into my head. You know, you've got to use your brain. You don't have the strength that the man has. You have to use your brain, you know, how to figure out how to do the job, you know. And Dad was just as much, I mean, he was a grand cook. Oh my goodness. You know, and he could crochet. He could look at a shirt or whatever, and he could make the pattern and sew it, you know, so he wasn't just saying one thing and living another. He was saying what he lived, you know. Yeah. And I got to experience that, you know. I learned how to cook, not how he taught me, because we cooked together. Mm-hmm. We would cook together, you know. I would work together with him. It was constantly a team, you know, we were a team effort. And his example was always, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you know. Mm-hmm. And so in my life, there was nothing in my mind that I couldn't do, you know. And I thought, well, you know, I remember when we were living in the logging camp, and I got us into some big messes because me and my stepbrother, because of my little adventureness, you know, and we always got out, mm-hmm. You know, where we could have been dead a couple of times. We could have been dead, you know, and I think it was because, you know, Dad always had that in the back of my head. There's a way. There's always a way.
Now, how does that look in, how should I say this? How does that look in your life, and how you consider yourself to be successful, and how that whole training, if you will, played out to make you successful in what you, depending on your idea of success, you know, that.
Right. My thinking of that is that Dad, you know, his inspiration for me, and his dad's inspiration, having the polio and not letting anything hold him back. I mean, he raised 8 kids basically, because he raised his wife's brothers and sisters. And here was this man who had polio, his left side not functioning perfectly, did remarkable things. And I think he inspired my dad. Of course he did. And my dad often said that, you know, how he was such an inspiration. Here, this man, you know, never complained, you never heard him say he couldn't do it. And here was a man that had a reason he should have said, but he never said it. Yeah. You know, so Dad got that from him. I got this from my dad. And so when the challenges came in life, you know, I just would jump in with both feet and think, you know, I can do this.
You have an example of that?
Well, when I decided I was going to be a firefighter for wildfires, you know, I had no clue what I was getting into. Absolutely no clue. You know, I hired on because I was a nurse then, and I asked if they and an EMT, and I asked them if they had anybody medical on their squad, and they said no. They hired me in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking I'm just going to walk around with Band-Aids and put it on people, you know, and you know, fix, you know. They handed me a shovel, and because I was the first aid person, I had to carry 2 packs out on the field, you know, and I'm out there I mean, it's hell fighting fires. I mean, it's no piece of cake, you know. Yeah. And that was the hardest, dirtiest job I ever did in my whole entire life, you know, and watching my physical body getting challenged to the extent that that challenges you there. I was
Were you the only woman on the team, on the
no,
crew?
I was not. That was the first year they let women on the team, and in fact we were a hotshot team. We were the first line attack, and none of us had ever fought fire before in our lives. And yeah, and they had five. There was five of us all together, women, and all of us were challenged to the max, and all of us came through. They were all country girls, like me. And I think a country girl has a different way of thinking because you're not just sitting in the house, doing normal women things. You're out there feeding cattle, you're out there fixing fences, you're out there doing a lot of different chores, which builds muscles up, that builds, your confidence up in to take on these chores. And it's really interesting because I bump into some of the girls now, and we look at each other and just laugh. Do you remember when we were the first women out there in the whole world? And I said, I do. And I remember some of the guys, that I bump into some of them every once in a while, and we were, talk over those times. And oh yeah, it was tough. It was tough. But
Did you ever find yourself in a situation where your background and what you had learned from Pete and how you were raised gave you an advantage?
Yes, all the time.
Yeah?
All the time.
How so?
Because I don't think I would have had the guts to step into any of the positions that I stepped into. Because I think his encouragement. And like I said, there is no male or female jobs. So when I would get interested in something, I wouldn't go, oh, Gina, you're a girl, you can't do this. I would say, oh, this sounds interesting. Let's see, and I'd step in, and when I gave my life to Christ in 1976, that opened a huge door for me because I realized what Dad had said, there's nothing you can't do. Well, then there's a verse in the scriptures that says you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you combine both of those. You got your earthly dad telling you there's nothing you can't do.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
You have your heavenly Father saying you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. Holy cow, the world is your doorstep.
That is a key point in this whole interview. Really, Gina, that is beautiful. I love that point that you just made.
Yeah. I mean, there is no man-woman thing here. There's just whatever opens doors before you and you want to step through that door, you've got the Lord giving you the strength to step in there. And, now, of course, I can't call on my earthly dad, but I could sure call on my heavenly Father. When I get into a situation, I'm calling.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
And he gives me the direction. He gives me the strength. He gives me the vision, and he helps me continue on doing, the challenges and the things that I do now.
Yeah. This almost feels like fast forwarding. I'm not doing that, but what would you tell women? What advice would you give women to be more courageous, to be more successful in their own right?
Well, for one, I wouldn't limit themselves as seeing themselves as just women. We are, yes, women. We have limitations in our physical beings, but again, through Christ, we can do all things. So don't allow yourself to stay, oh, I can only do this because I'm a woman. Allow yourself to step into that adventure. Allow yourself to dream. Allow yourself to expand out of the box that society has put you into. Because our Heavenly Father did not make us male and female that we're going to lock us into a box and say you have to just stay like this. He opened up the whole world for us as both. We are here to encourage each other. We're here to build each other. We're here to help direct each other, but he has given us each a challenge, and each a purpose in our lives. And, and it's not limited because we are female or male. I would say this to the same with a man, don't limit yourself into what you think, oh, I'm a man, I can only do this. No, you are a creation of God, and he has made you for a specific thing and specific purposes. He's put interest in your heart. He's put interest in your mind, step out into them. And if you draw on him, he will give you the strength and the abilities, or the direction to get the abilities to accomplish what your heart's desire is.
Yeah. Now, list some of the things that you do that your ordinary housewife doesn't do. Okay. I mean, I know you're like a blacksmith or something, aren't you?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. And you do forging of some sort.
Yes.
So
Yes.
list the things that you do. Okay.
Okay.
That the ordinary gal in the grocery store probably doesn't do.
Well, I think probably out of most of the things, I do hunt. There's a lot of women that are hunters, but I'm one of those women that are hunters. I enjoy shooting. I enjoy still being out in the woods 99% of the time by myself with my cameras, because I also photograph. And I will hunt. I will learn outdoor skills, outdoor crafts, and how to build those outdoor skills and use them. Blacksmithing came into my life just 10 years ago. I was not in any kind of a thought of being a blacksmith. That opened up humongous doors for me, challenges way beyond my abilities and skills, way beyond my strengths. Again, drawing back on Dad's thoughts, and again, drawing onto the Word of God, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, which means when I go into my forge to go pound on steel, I pray because I need that strength. I need that direction to create what I do.
How did you get into blacksmithing? How did you get into forging, things like that? And why? Why?
I don't know. Actually, I don't. I had people ask me that ever since I've gotten into this, because I sell things. I go to shows, and I sell things around, and I'll have people ask me that. It's like, why did you? I said, I had no clue. I said, I was a nurse all of my career, and I photographed for a hobby. I said, one day I decided I wanted to pound on steel. And I'm like, I have no clue why I wanted to pound on steel. And I heard about a man who he was a blacksmith, and he could sort of give you some, tips and stuff. And so I contacted him, and he asked me the same question. Well, why do you want a blacksmith? And I said, I don't know. And he says, well, come on over and we'll see what you can do. And I said, well, I can't do anything. I don't know anything about it. And so he started up this gigantic forge, old style, with a coal, with a hand blower on it, and I'm looking at this going, oh my goodness, but something happened when I walked into his shop. And Dad had that shop, on A Street in Fresno.
Yeah, the truck riding tank repair, right?
Right. Yeah. Yep. And I used to follow him around like a puppy dog in that shop, okay, when I was a kid. I walked into his shop, and it smelled like that shop. It's had that mechanic, it had that shop, and I just was like, I'm home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, whoa, what is this? Because Dad
grease at me. Yeah.
Yeah, Dad wasn't a blacksmith, but he was a master welder and one fabulous fabricator and everything, so as one of his jobs. Anyway, so he cranks up this forge, and he takes this round piece of steel, and he makes this perfectly square little tip point on the end of it. He did it one time, and he looked at me and he says, now it's your turn. And I says, well, can I practice? He goes, no. He said, I don't want to waste your time or mine. You either got it or you don't. No pressure, right?
Right.
So I had never cranked a big old forge like that in my life, so I did this cranking thing and I'm praying under my breath this whole time. It's like, dear God, what do I do? Well, I did that point 3 times perfectly. And he looked at me and he says, that is one of the most important procedures that you just did for blacksmithers, for blacksmithing. He says, I've had doctors come over here who cannot do that point, who wants to blacksmith. And he said, you can do anything you want blacksmithing.
Because you could do that. Yeah.
I could do this technique. And I said, are you serious? Because, to me, a blacksmith had to have arms like, a football player or whatever, and I said, I'm just this little puny person, I'm not. And he said, it's not about being big old strong brawny. He says, it's about technique, and I can give you some tips on that. So 10 years ago, he started giving me the tips, and I just jumped in with both feet, and it's just been an amazing adventure.
Wow.
I have met people that I would have never met behind my camera. It has taken me to, into people's homes and them into my lives. And, and I just counted another great tool that the Lord could use to bring people across your path, that you don't normally would, get involved with. And there, it's an amazing challenge. There's not many women blacksmiths, but there is more now. And it's been cute because I'll have guys, oh yeah, you blacksmith, let me see your arm. And I said, no, look at the calluses on my hands. It's not so much the arm, it's the calluses on your hands. Right. And I just laugh, because it's not a typical little woman's job, but it's a job that I truly, truly enjoy. Another thing that your typical woman doesn't do is train horses, and I have trained horses throughout, off and on throughout my life, and that's another huge challenge that I have totally enjoyed. Another place where I totally have a dependence on the Lord for also. And now, again, just like blacksmithing, there's a lot of women who are trainers and very good trainers, And so there is, other areas that women are stepping into over the years that I think is fabulous, because there's another, in the horse world, women have another way of being able to, communicate with a horse. And the horses respond to a woman, and I can't say it in a gentler way, because the horse is going to be a horse. But the woman, as you learn how to deal with that horse, you're going to bring that gentler spirit out of that horse,
Sure.
And the men trainers now are learning these things too. So the horse training world has really broadened into the areas of more gentler, easier way of training for both man and woman, to do,
Mm-hmm.
Then I got into goat packing, which
I was going to ask you about that. You don't train just horses, you train goats too, right?
Yeah. I got into goat packing a few years ago. I had a really bad ski wreck that was one heartbeat from being dead. And by the grace of God, I recovered from that. And I had a piece of property then that I had needed to be mowed down. And I couldn't, at that point, as I was recovering, I couldn't push a mower to mow it. So I got a couple of goats and I put them in the field. Well, then I found out you can pack these things if you train them, so I started learning how to train pack goats, and they're just funner than heck. They're a lot easier to train than a horse. I have each. I have a horse and 2 goats, and
you can't get bucked off a goat,
No, that's because you don't get on them. But I'm sure they'd buck you off anyway. But the goats, like when I go up and do my photography, when I'm hiking up in the mountains, a lot of times I'll take either one or both of the goats, and I'll pack my lunch and my water and my supplies on them, and I take my cameras. And so they carry what I want, you know, that I would have in my truck on them while I'm hiking the woods looking for pictures or doing whatever I want to find, you know. And then I have not yet packed overnight with them because I don't need to yet. But there's people that take these goats out on major hunting expeditions, and they pack out for a week at a time with these goats.
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and they hunt and they bring them back in. The animals actually pack out all of their gear to put up amazing camps, tents and everything. And then the goats will pack out the meat, you know, so they're very versatile, very, very, very loyal animals, and very, very fun, you know.
They're sure-footed?
Oh, sheesh, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, they have a great sense of humor that you can play with goats like you do a dog. I mean, they're just fun, you know, and they're great companions for a horse. I only have one horse because I can devote myself to one horse and two goats, but there's only so much of me, you know. So,
yeah, right.
You know, I can't have a collection of any more than this, you know, and they're great buddies. They're all great buddies, you know, and
they got personalities too, don't they?
Every one of them have a total individual personality. Everyone.
Yeah.
You know, and you can sit out there and just crack up laughing at watching their little antics, you know, with each other. And, you know, I tell them, you know, if they could speak English, we could communicate a little better, but I mean, not much better, because we get our message across, all three of us, you know, or all four of us, you know, so.
Yeah. So anything else you do that stands out that other women might be inspired by? I mean, that's plenty, but I'm just kind of seeing how far we can go with this.
I think, and I can't say just for women, I think for people in general, learning how to be content with yourself, taking time to be by yourself, getting to learn about yourself, getting to understand your relationship with the creator that made you. I think that is probably one of the biggest challenges mankind has, because man or woman are so easily dependent on others that they have no sense of who they really are, nor of a sense of who God made them to be, or any of a sense of who God himself is.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't often get that when you're around people and activity all the time. You get that more when you can find a place where, and for me, of course, the mountains is such a wonderful place, because it's what he had spoken to existence. We messed it up, of course, but his ultimate beauty, variety, and creativity is out there, you know. And to spend a day out there, in fact, I was out there yesterday behind my camera, sitting down by the river canyon, and just you can't explain the peace and the understanding of he's with you at all times wherever you are.
Yeah.
You know, and I think when people realize that they are never alone, you might not have a human being with you. There's a huge peace in that, knowing that the greatest one of all creation is with you all the time, and you can draw on him, you know. And I think that's the greatest challenge for anybody, is to get to know the man who died to save your life, you know. And once you get to know him, everything else goes from there. You know, being our own independent person is very shallow, but being our independent person with his hand in yours makes you a much better person all the way around.
That is beautiful. I think we're going to end it on that note. That is wonderful. I feel like I've just been to church, Gina.
Praise God. Good.